And we are live, guys. Welcome to the Intro to Web Development workshop where we will be cloning Netflix. Today, you've got Harjot here, and that's myself, and I've got Akhil and Harris from DSC.
Hey.
Awesome. What is up, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in. I guess we're just going to give it like 3 or 4 minutes while we wait for a couple of more people to tune in. And yeah, we can get started in a bit. So I think until then, Harjot, hit it with the music, man.
Yeah. Awkward silent.
Shout out, guys. Shout out to Dhruv in the house. Shout out to Liam, Vivek, Julita. Nice to see you guys here. Thank you, Julita. Thank you so much. I was hoping that would come up. Yeah, that's actually 3 from 23. I think it's a great conversation starter. But yeah, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Yo, Akhil, how you feeling, man? It's gonna be so much fun today. We're gonna start off by going through HTML, CSS, then build that Netflix clone. It's gonna be insane.
Yeah, guys, today we're going to show you the power of just HTML and CSS and how you can build a $1 billion landing page and how simple it is to just get started. So I hope you guys are super excited. We're going to try our best to keep it as practical as possible. And I hope you guys take a lot away from this and get to add something to your portfolio. Harjot, do you mind allowing me to screen share? I guess we can begin.
Sure. Yes, let's get started, man.
Let's do this, guys. Let's do this. I hope you guys have a lot of fun with this. Actually, Harris, do you want to just give a little bit of a just introduction and stuff?
Yeah, I mean I have some slides if I can share them if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Yeah.
Cool. Let me make sure I can screen share. If that's me. There we go. Cool. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Cool. Perfect. So, hey, everyone. Welcome to the Introduction to Web Development. This is a 2-part boot camp that Zaio is fortunately hosting for us. They're amazing at what they do. So, yeah, like I said, it's 2 parts. We'll talk about them more in a bit. So I just want to get over some housekeeping. as you all know, we have these community guidelines. You guys are used to this by now. Basically, be nice to everyone. If you have any questions, you can ask the host, or make sure your questions get answered during the live stream. And if any of you have any ideas, just practice saying yes and building on each other's ideas. Also, if you want to stay tuned on some other tips we have coming up on social media after this event, or being notified of when the next bootcamp is, or any other event we do in the future, you can join our WhatsApp and our Instagrams scanning the QR codes, or just using the URLs at the bottom. So yeah, this is Zaio. Zaio is a web development bootcamp. They basically teach people how to do web dev, train them up to basically be really good at what they do. Harjot and Akil are amazing. I've been talking to them for a few weeks now. They're great at what they do. They're great personalities. You guys are in for a big treat. And like I said earlier, this is a bootcamp. It's the first one of 2. So to complete your Netflix clone, you have to attend the next one, and you'll be deploying it using Net2Fly next week. And you can then use this on your portfolio. So I hope you guys are excited as I am, and I'm going to hand it back over to Harjot and Akil to basically start teaching you.
Awesome, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Harris, for the kind words. Right. We're super excited, guys. This is going to be epic. I hope you guys take away a lot from this. And yeah, let me share my screen. Awesome. Yeah, so the event will be available. It is already on YouTube. So right over here, this link that you've tuned into on YouTube will be available to view later. Awesome. Let's do this, guys. Awesome, guys. So we are Zaio, and we will be doing the Intro to Web Development series, as Harris said. And here's a little bit of introduction. So my name is Akil. I was born in India, Hyderabad. I was brought up in Nairobi, Kenya, and I went to South Africa to pursue my undergrad in computer science and information systems in Cape Town. And yeah, that is my Instagram handle there, Akil Bodu. Would love to connect with you guys. It's been great. Like, we've been doing a lot of workshops, and it's been fun connecting with a whole lot of people. And it's great to keep in touch with you guys. And yeah, I guess Harjot, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, man. So I'm talking from Malawi. I'm currently in Blantyre, Malawi. I was born here, raised in Blantyre, Malawi, then went to South Africa, Cape Town, studied at the University of Cape Town. That's where I met Akil, first day at university, and we've been together. We started Zaio together, and it's been a journey since then, eh? Yeah, I'm super excited for this workshop. That's my Instagram handle, and if you have any questions, just want to get to know me, you want to just chat to me, reach out to me on I am Harjot Singh, and yeah, let's get connected.
Also, guys, if you're ever down in Nairobi, Kenya, you got to hit me up. We can grab a drink. I can show you guys around here. It's a beautiful place to be. And also, if you're ever down in South Africa as well, we can always meet up. So that is one of the coolest things I like about the DSC network. You get to meet people from all over the world. Yeah, and I mean, like, for Harjot,
yeah, you got Malawi
invitation.
Open invitation. There's nothing much to do. You better book like a 4-day flight if you're coming this side. There's nothing much to do. Just Lake Malawi, and then yeah, I can show you around.
I'm actually going to Malawi this Friday, so I've been told to keep my expectations low. So yeah, that'll be interesting. And yeah, Hyderabad, guys, the city of biryani. Awesome. So yeah, guys, please follow us on Instagram. Would love to connect with you guys. Zaio.io is our Instagram handle. So here's the agenda, guys. We'll do a little bit of housekeeping before going into the workshop. Talk a little bit about the building blocks of the web. What exactly powers the web. Just touch on the basics of that. Then we'll dive into HTML. So this workshop will be a lot more focused on HTML. And then the next workshop will be a whole lot more CSS. So just a heads up, by the end of this workshop, the Netflix landing page is going to look not so great. It's going to look like really, really bleak. But a lot of the styling will be done in the next workshop. So you'll be surprised how much you can achieve in just 1.5 hours, right? So this will be epic, guys. So let's just start off with a little bit of housekeeping, a little bit about Zaio. So guys, we've been running Zaio for basically the past 3 years. And we've done over 600 plus iterations on our training. And essentially what we do is we start careers, right? So what we do is we identify high potential talent and we make them industry ready and we help them get high paying jobs. And we do this through interactive courses that we're working on. And we also just giving around, workshops all around the world right now. So that's pretty much a little bit about Zaio. Harjot, do you want to add anything?
Dude, I'm just excited to get started, man. Let's just get started.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, yeah, guys, I think just ignore this first line over here because we have already dropped the starter code on Zoom on the YouTube chat right now. I'm just going to drop it again. So, guys, the link that I've just put on the YouTube chat is basically the code. Which don't worry about it. I'll show you guys how to get started and everything. But the most important thing is we want this session to be really engaging, guys, engaging and interactive. So I'm loving all the comments in the chat, guys. This is amazing to see. And yes, it will be like the moment the live session is over, it will be live on YouTube. So you can use the same link to actually rewind and review concepts. So don't worry about it. It will be live. It will be uploaded on YouTube. And yeah, guys, please drop any questions on the chat so that we can keep the session engaging. That is one of the benefits of doing this session live, okay? So guys, this is a crash course. It is not possible to cover every single concept of HTML and CSS in the time while building Netflix. But by the end of this, we will equip you with what you need to get started, okay? So by the end of this series, you will build the Netflix landing page clone, okay? And just with the power of HTML and CSS, you'll understand and realize how easy it is to build billion-dollar businesses with just HTML and CSS. JavaScript, of course, is extremely important for the web, which we'll talk about a little more. Just a heads up as well, HTML and CSS is quite linked. So maybe not in this workshop, but in the future workshop, we'll be jumping a lot between CSS and HTML. So just a heads up and just watch out for that, okay? Don't get confused. Because it is quite intertwined, right? And here's some hashtag ABCD. Anybody can do. So HTML, CSS is the best way to get started. Like for any beginner, it's super easy to get started with HTML and CSS. So without further ado, let's do this. Okay, let's do this. Okay. Now let's start by talking about the building of the web. So the building blocks of the web is made up of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML and CSS will be covering, right? Specifically talk about HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And all the content on websites comes from HTML. Okay? So any website that you'll open up, in fact, like right now you have YouTube open in front of you, everything starts off with an HTML file, okay? It's essentially the way all applications start off, like whatever framework you're building in web, HTML is the starting file, okay? It's really easy. It's the best for beginners to enter the world of programming. So if you're not studying computer science, don't stress. Like HTML, CSS is extremely easy. If you are studying computer science, this is going to be a breeze for you. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoy this. Now CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And essentially CSS is more focused on the look of the site, whereas HTML is focused more on adding elements to the site, right? So some of the examples are like, you get to do fonts with CSS, you get to add colors, backgrounds, layouts, and many more styles. So, I mean, like looking at it from an analogy perspective, we like to use the human body analogy. Essentially, HTML is like a body that's naked. And like if you use CSS, you can wear an amazing suit, you can wear an amazing dress, and you can look awesome in it, and you look attractive wearing such amazing clothes. That's what CSS does. For example, if you go to the Netflix site, there's something about it that makes you want to stick around. And CSS is responsible for making that user experience so engaging, right? So essentially HTML allows you to add elements to the site, and then CSS allows you to style these elements so that it looks more engaging and more attractive. And then there's JavaScript, right? JavaScript is essentially a programming language. If you're doing CS, I'm sure you guys have come across C, C++, Python, Java, and so on. Similarly, JavaScript is also a programming language. And essentially the job of JavaScript is to manipulate HTML and CSS, right? And it helps us build web applications. So when I say manipulate HTML and CSS, firstly, it means that we can, like when you click on a button and stuff, you can trigger actions, and JavaScript helps you do these things, right? It makes it more engaging. So when you click on a button, you want to trigger an action, JavaScript will handle that, right? And you can change the color of a button, for example, when you click on it. And that is how you use JavaScript to change CSS, to change some sort of style, or to change the position of an element. So that's essentially how JavaScript comes into the mix. And we can a lot of web applications with JavaScript. So I'm sure most of you might have heard of frameworks like React.js, or Node.js. These are really popular frameworks. You know, the #1 UI library in the world right now is React.js, built by Facebook, and it's all based off of JavaScript, right? Everything starts off with JavaScript. Unfortunately, we won't be doing this in this workshop series, but if you are interested, please let us know. We'll be putting a feedback form at the end of this workshop, and we'd love to hear from you guys, you know, if you'd like us to do something more than just HTML and CSS, of course, based on how we do for HTML and CSS. So here's something interesting, right? Honestly, you only need HTML. So let me actually open up Netflix and show you guys something that's really mind-blowing. It's really gonna blow your mind. Okay, so I'm actually logged in right now. So what I'll do is I'm just gonna open an incognito window, and I'm gonna say Netflix, because I'm actually logged into my account. And yeah, this is what Netflix looks like, right? So it looks fantastic and everything. I just want to see if I'm able to use my. I don't think I can use my thing. Well, let me just log out of my account. It's actually Harjot's account.
You're welcome.
Log out. Thanks, man. So I just want to show you guys. Go now. Okay. So yeah, this is the Netflix landing page, and I want to show you guys how HTML could be like literally the only thing you use to build sites, right? It can be quite mind-blowing. Like you can see how beautiful Netflix looks right now. And if I disable all styles, it's going to remove all the CSS that we have. And now you can see this is what the site looks like, right? So technically all the information is there, guys. All the information is there. Like you can see that you can download your favorite shows and watch it offline. You can enjoy your TV. You can watch it on smart TVs, PlayStation. Like the info is there, right? But it's horrible, right? And that's where CSS comes in. Like CSS makes the site look a whole lot more engaging and a whole lot more enjoyable, right? This is only just with HTML. So honestly, you only need HTML, but CSS is what makes the site look a whole lot more interesting, okay? Yeah. Hang on a sec, just waiting for this thing to load. And yeah, so having said that, I guess let's jump into the HTML basics, right? So we'll be covering quite a few things over here. And I just want to start off by saying that HTML is really simple, right? Essentially what HTML does is it tells the browser exactly what content we are writing. So when I say content, I mean like adding a heading, adding a paragraph, you know, making font bold, making like, you know, making text italic, you know, when you click on a button, allowing it to redirect to a certain page or open it up on another page, you know, essentially that's what HTML does. It puts elements on the screen, right? And then there's the nav bar at the top of the page, for example. So there's actually an HTML nav element you can use. There's a footer element you can use in HTML. There's a whole, like there's a lot of elements that you can use in HTML. There's even a video element you can use, right? All this is going to make a lot more sense, but just the point you have to take away from here is HTML essentially tells the browser what components we're adding. So the browser will understand, okay, this is a heading, this is a, you know, this is a subheading, this is a paragraph, you know, there's some emphasis on this text over here. It just essentially tells the elements are there. Talking about the basics, and everything uses tags, right? So probably the most important thing you need to know, and everything wrapped in tags to tell the browser what is what, right? So think of a book before we jump into the details, right? So a book has a cover, right? So you have a cover page in a book, and then inside the book we have a whole bunch of pages, right? Now each page has like, you know, a title, has a subheading, has paragraphs, and has page numbers and so on, right? So that's essentially how a book works, right? So similarly, think of bringing that analogy to HTML. Sorry guys, I just saw a message, voice cutting. Harjot, did you catch everything? Is everything okay? Do I have to repeat anything?
Everything's been fine. I'm not sure what part can we repeat, Vivek?
Vivek, would you like me to repeat something, maybe?
Anything crucial we missed?
Okay, I mean, let me just repeat what I was talking about. You know, the over here. So essentially, this is called, so everything is wrapped around in tags, right? And to explain tags, think of a book as an analogy, right? So a book has a cover, and a book has a bunch of pages, and inside pages, we have titles, we have subheadings, we have paragraphs, and we have page numbers, and we have all these elements, right? So essentially, think of a book analogy. A book analogy has, this is how it would look like if we would use it in HTML, right? So there'd be the cover. The first thing would be the cover, and then you can see that there's this opening angle bracket, and then there's the word cover and the closing angle bracket, and that whole thing is called an opening tag, right? And then under that, we have the closing tag. So the only difference between the opening tag and the closing tag is we have this / over here before cover, right? So basically, this is the cover that we spoke about. And then inside the cover, we have a whole bunch of pages, right? So let's see what that would look like. I mean, before we talk about that, this combination of an opening tag and a closing tag is actually known as an element, okay? So people often get confused with this. Just don't get confused. This is the cover element, and then that is the cover opening tag, that is the cover closing tag, okay? Now, if we add pages to this mix, right, we can see that we have the page opening tag and the page closing tag over here, and we've added one page element in our book, right? So our book basically has a cover, and inside the cover, we have this page element, right? And then we can add more pages inside this element, inside the cover element, right? And then if we, inside a page, we can even add more elements, right? So we can add a heading, we can add a subheading, and we can add a paragraph, right? So the heading, for example, would be like COVID happens, and then subheading is at the end of the world, and then paragraph 2020 was great, then it all started, right? So this is an example of tags, right? The concept I want you guys to take away from this slide is that essentially HTML is all about using tags, okay? So there's the cover opening tag, there's the page opening tag, there's the heading opening tag here, subheading opening tag, and then the P tag for paragraph, right? So this is essentially how HTML works. This is how the code would look like in HTML. Obviously, you can't use the word like cover and page and stuff in HTML. So we will talk about the specific elements in a bit, right? So I hope you guys understood, essentially how you would write the code, right? So essentially tags are inside these angle brackets. Closing tags include this /, right? So for example, P would be the opening tag, and then /P with this angle brackets would mean the closing tag, right? This will make a lot more sense as we dive into the practicalities. And then everything from the opening tag to the closing tag is called an element, and then elements define our content in the browser, right? So the browser will understand, if we're trying to write a heading, if we're trying to write a paragraph, and so on, okay? Awesome. So now let's take this to our code editor, right? So I actually dropped a link on the chat. I'm just gonna drop it there again. And this is basically the GitHub link. Let me just open this up and drag it over here. So guys, the link I just dropped in the chat, I basically opened that right now, okay? What you guys need to do is you need to click on code right now, and then you need to download the code, download the zip code, okay? Now, apart from that, you guys need to also just download VS Code, okay? I'm just gonna open up the link real quick. And that is the VS Code link, okay? Now, depending on whatever operating system you have, just make sure you download the right VS Code. So what is VS Code? VS Code is what we'll be using. VS Code stands for Visual Studio Code. It's essentially, a code editor, right? So it'll help us write our code. It'll make it so much easier. Like I actually have a dedicated slide just talking about how awesome VS Code is. So definitely recommend you guys to use VS Code, okay? So just make sure that you have VS Code downloaded. I've dropped both the links on the YouTube chat right now. And just download the zip, right? Let me also download it. And then once it's downloaded, click on it. And you can see that I'll be able to access this folder, right? So you can see that I have just the assets folder. Okay, there's nothing much happening in here, right? And then what I want you guys to do is I want you to open this folder with VS Code. So I'm sure you guys have already started downloading it. I mean, while it's downloading, we'll still go through a few concepts. So it makes sense. We'll not be writing too much code in the starting because we've got to wait for it to download, right? So I already have it open. How you would open it is I like to drag and drop it like this and open it, So I already actually have it open right now. And this is what it looks like in my VS Code. It might look slightly different in yours. Please don't worry about it. This is just some sort of theme that I've used, okay? Now, this is basically our code editor, and we have this assets folder to get started, okay? Now, let us actually just go back to the slides real quick. And let's talk a little bit about file naming while we wait for everything to download, okay? So normally, whenever you create any files, right? So you'll find yourself creating files a lot of the times when you want to, build websites, right? Or whatever project you're working on, okay? Just make sure that you stick to lowercase for naming files. It's just a lot more easier to manage, right? Keep the names short. Don't make it too long, because what tends to happen is you tend to point to certain files using something called relative paths, which we'll cover. Make sure you have descriptive meanings. Don't call something page.html. That'll get limit some. You can call it profile.html, for example, if you're building a profile page. Now, do not ever add spaces, right? If you add spaces, you can encounter a few issues. If you want to separate out words, use either an underscore or use a hyphen, okay? So Adam, once you've installed VS Code, just make sure to open it, open the project in Visual Studio Code. So there's a couple of ways you can open it. Like you can go to File, and then you can say Open, and then find the folder that you downloaded from GitHub, and it'll open up like this, okay? Yeah, thank you, Liam. Thank you so much. Awesome. So that's a little bit about file naming, guys. Really basic stuff. It might not feel relevant for such a small project, but as the projects get bigger, you'll find yourself working with too many files, and it's really important that you know these basics, that you don't encounter any silly issues, okay? Now, file organizing. Normally, the main folder is known as the root folder, okay? Index.html is what's used for the home or the root file, okay? Now, when I say root folder, don't get confused. Basically, opening, for example, the folder I downloaded over here is called Netflix DSC Brunel master. For you guys, it's going to be called master. For me, it's just called Brunel. And this folder is basically the root folder, okay? So it's nothing fancy. Root folder means that this is where all the files will be added. And then inside this project, you can add subfiles. And normally in this root folder, we'll have the index.html file, okay? So what I'll do is I'll just create a file right now. I'll call it index.html. Now, index.html is basically, as I said, the starting file. Like every site you open starts with index.html. Maybe it's not called index.html, but normally that is what pages start with, okay? Now it's really critical that you understand that the project will still work if the index.html is in subfolders, depending on what framework you're using. But the general practice is to keep your index.html inside the root folder. So the root folder here would be Netflix DSC Brunel, okay? And yeah, normally it's just good practice to create folders just to structure your elements better. For example, already in our project right now, we already have this assets folder. So assets means that we're just going to put anything to do with pictures and all that kind of information over here, okay? So Sahan, don't worry about cloning the repository. Please just download it, right? This is not a Git workshop. We won't be covering the Git concepts. So just download it, okay? Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the file structure in HTML, okay? So now the reason why I really emphasized on you guys downloading VS Code is because you can do some really cool stuff, okay? For example, now I'm just going to type exclamation mark over here and hit enter. And you can see that it's generated some sort of template code for me right now. So what I basically did, just to repeat, I typed exclamation mark, and then I got these options over here in VS Code. And it automatically comes installed with VS Code. You don't have to install anything extra. It's called Emmet, right? The Emmet abbreviation. Now, if I hit enter, it created this template code for me. And you can see that this is basically our template code for HTML. This is the file structure that we'll be working with, okay? So now you can see that there's a couple of elements that we need to know about. There's the doc type HTML that is at the top of the file, right? right? So doc type HTML is here. So it's like it's like a tag. It's like an opening tag, right? It has no closing tag, but it just essentially what it does is it just tells the browser that it's an HTML5 file. So this is important because HTML has gone through several iterations, right? So by putting this doc type HTML, the browser will recognize any new kind of elements that we can use with HTML. Okay. Now we also have HTML. So we have the HTML tag over there, and then we have the HTML closing tag over here, and everything is put inside this HTML element, right? Now what HTML does is it tells the browser that only HTML is written in between these tags. So basically it just tells the browser that between these tags we'll be writing HTML code, okay? It is kind of redundant because doctype HTML there tells the browser it's an HTML5 file, but that is essentially the structure, okay? You don't have to worry too much about it. You'll not really be changing that ever, right? Now head is where it gets a little interesting, right? So normally head is in whatever is in the head is not really visible in the browser. So in the body of the browser, right? So it's essentially like the brain, right? It contains something called meta tags with essential information. So if we ever want to use fonts, for example, or we want to import any modules, for example, if we want to import like a database module, like if we want to use Firebase in our project, we would add that information inside the head, right? And the head, when it's in the head, we'll be able to access that information from anywhere in the document, right? So it's like the brain. It's not really visible there, right? But it has important information that the website will not function as expected without that information, the meta tags, okay? So that is just something to note. The one thing that does have some sort of impact on the site is title, right? So it's within the head and it's basically a tab heading, right? So you can see that over here by default, we have the title, right? And it's the tab heading. So what I'll do now is I just want to put this here as well so that I can have my code editor and browser together. And what I'll do is I'll open Netflix again over here. And you can see that at the top over here, it says Netflix Kenya, watch TV shows online, watch movies online. And that's the name of that's the title, right? So similarly, I'm just going to say Netflix Brunel, okay? I'm just going to call it Netflix Brunel and I'm going to hit save, right? Now, if I want to see, like, whatever changes I'm making in my HTML right now, if I want to see it in my browser, there's two ways of doing this, okay? Yes, Lakmeet, this will be uploaded on the channel. So basically, what I was saying is this HTML code that we have written, if you want to visually see what changes are happening, there's two ways to do it, right? So the first way is we can, we can either download the file, right? So you can see that, let me just move this here. Sorry guys for the too much movement. But basically over here, I have index.html, right? This is my index.html file. If I open a new tab and I just drag, if I just drag this file over here, you'll see that it says Netflix Brunel up there, right? Which means that I'm able to see the changes that I'm making, okay? But normally, because we're using VS Code, we don't have to do this. We can use something really cool. It's called Live Server, okay? Now, I want you guys to go to this tab over here, this fifth tab from the top, and you can see that you can search for something called extensions, right? I want you to search for Live Server, okay? And you just download the first thing by Ritwik Day, right? So I want you to just go to the fifth tab and type this text, Live Server, okay? And download this extension, right? So just make sure that you download it. Mine is already installed. You might have to restart your VS Code, but normally you don't have to. But I've seen some people had issues in the past in order to make it work. And now once we've installed that extension, right? If you right click on index.html, you'll get an extra option here that says open with Live Server, right? So if I open with Live Server now, just waiting for it to open, actually open here. You can see that I have it. I have Netflix Brunel open over here with my live server. Okay. Now, if I ever make changes to my document, so if I, for example, if I change this to Netflix, you know, let me see what Netflix has. Watch TV shows online. So Netflix Brunel, and I'm just going to add some text here. Watch TV shows online, right? And I hit save. You'll see that our browser automatically reloaded. But if we had the index.html file, we would have to manually refresh the page. Okay. Yeah. So Bryson, that's right. I think it's called Marketplace, if I'm not mistaken. Is it? No, it's called extensions. But yeah, it's essentially like a marketplace of a whole bunch of extensions that you can use. Awesome. Great. So yeah, I guess we can continue. Now, this is basically our HTML document. And then we've talked about this doc type, we've talked about HTML, we've talked about the head, which is kind of like the brain. And then we're yet to talk about the body, right? So let's talk a little bit about the body. And you can see that the body is essentially where all the content goes. So if you want to add like headings, paragraphs, you know, all kinds of HTML elements, we normally add it in the body. Okay. Let's just start off by talking about our first element, which is headings and paragraphs, right? So headings normally denote hierarchy and page structure. Okay. And it's something important. There are 6 types of headings you can write. So you can use this H1 opening tag, H1 tag to actually write a heading, which I'll show you guys an example of. And you can write that in 6 different levels, right? So do not use H7, H8, and so on, because that's not going to work, right? So basically, you can only have 6 levels of headings, right? So let's actually create our first heading using the Netflix page. Okay, so right now in front of me, I have the Netflix page open, and I'm going to use this text over here. Okay, this text says unlimited movies, TV shows, and more. And I'm going to make this my H1 inside my body, right? Now, a cool thing if you're using VS Code, you can type H1, right? And then hit enter, and it'll automatically create the tag for you and put the cursor in between the tags. So this will allow you to directly type whatever you want to type. So I already copied that text, and I'm just going to paste it over here. And you can see I have my H1 tag right now, okay? And then similarly, I'm just going to use H2 for this text. So I just copied that text. And then similarly, H2, add the text there, right? Then next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add H3, now the text there, right? So basically you can see that I've added H1, H2, H3. Now, if you want to visually see what's happening, if I save the file and I go to my live server over here, you can see that the text has appeared. So wow, guys, congratulations. If you just did that for the first time, you have successfully written code and it successfully works and it appears in the browser, right? So you can see that this is H1, H2, and H3. So these are the different levels of headings. And you can see that the only thing that varies is the size, right? And also there's a semantic meaning. The browser understands that this is heading 1, this is heading 2, which means it's a subheading, and then this is a subheading, and so on, right? So there's different levels of hierarchy, 6 levels, right? So that's essentially the heading, right? So obviously it looks nothing like Netflix, but you'll be surprised that this is the exact code that we're going to use to style, and it's going to look exactly like this in a few, I mean, like probably by the next workshop. Yeah. So let us continue. The next thing is paragraphs, right? So paragraphs are basically the regular text that we use, right? So it's normally paragraphs are not numbered. It's just the P tag. So you have the P tag and then you enter text inside it, okay? So let's do another example, right? So over here, it says enjoy your TV, right? So I'm just going to create another heading below here, H1. I'm going to say enjoy your TV, add the text there. Now, the main thing I want to show you guys, we've already done H1, right? The main thing I want to show you guys is the paragraph tag. So I'm going to copy this text, Control C, H2, sorry, not H2, my bad. I'm going to show you guys the P tag, paragraph, right? So if I use P and hit enter and paste it there, we'll basically have the P tag. And now I'm going to, before I save the file, you can see that this is what our file looked like. Now I'm going to save it. And now you'll see that more text has been added over here, okay? You can see that we have the H1 and then we have this paragraph text over here. So that's what a paragraph looks like, okay? So these are the different 2 elements that we've covered right now, headings and paragraphs. Pretty simple, right? Awesome, awesome, awesome. So yeah, guys, as I said, I have a dedicated slide on how awesome VS Code is. It is fantastic. It closes all tags for you. auto-completes code for you. Like you have the template code thanks to Emmet. And then if you're using like React, if you're going to be using Python, it has a whole bunch of extensions. Like it has a whole bunch of like a library of extensions you can use. As Bryson said, like this, like essentially a marketplace where people create extensions and you can access all these different extensions. It's crazy. And then it's really easy to comment code, right? So we'll talk a bit more about commenting in a bit, but that is the power of VS Code. There's so much you can do. I'm sure if you guys look around, you'll definitely figure out and you'll be quite impressed. It's probably the most favorite code editor for most developers around the world. Okay, now moving on. So we've talked about headings, paragraphs, now let's talk about strong and emphasis, right? So strong basically writes bold text in the browser. So essentially, for example, if I come over here, right, and I have the word PlayStation over here, and I want to make that bold. Okay, I want that to appear bold. What I'll do is I'm going to come to PlayStation over here, and I'm going to say strong, right? So now you can see I manually typed it, the opening brackets and stuff. And then I'm going to put the closing tag. So you can see that I typed the opening bracket and automatically VS Code generated the closing tag, right? And then we basically have this PlayStation word over here, and I'm going to hit save. And you can see that this PlayStation word is now in bold, right? So we've used this strong element over here to make this text bold. Okay, so that's an example of a different kind of way of making the code look, the text looks slightly different. Now the reason why it's important to use strong versus, there's also other ways of doing it, but recommend that you use strong for keeping text bold. It tells the browser that this is a text of strong importance. It gives it some sort of semantic meaning, right? So that's basically why you use strong. Then if you want to write text in italic, you use EM, right? So similar to like, using strong, we made PlayStation bold by using strong. We put the word PlayStation in between two strong tags. We can make another text italic, right? So let's make Chromecast italic over here. So I have Chromecast over here. And to make it italic, you have to use EM, right? And then you can see generated the closing tag for me. And I'm just going to automatically paste it there. And if I hit save and look at my browser, you can see that Chromecast is now italic. Okay, so that's basically how you make text strong and how you make text bold, right? So just something to take away from here. You must have observed that we added this strong tag and this EM tag inside the P tag, which works perfectly fine, right? Because you want to make that particular text bold. Now, something you can't do is if you have this text like this and strong is your opening tag over there, and you want to add your closing tag strong over here, it's not the right way to do things. I'm actually not sure what will happen. It actually made everything bold, but then if you hand over this code to another developer, they're going to laugh at you because this is not the right way of doing things, right? So basically, you want to make sure that this is actually within the P tag, right? Just to maintain some sort of hierarchy, okay? But yeah, I'm just going to go back to how it was before. That is basically how you write, make text strong and how you make it italic, how you make it bold, how you make it italic, okay? Awesome. Now moving on, let's see what else we have. So yeah, basically the same point I just talked about right now. These are inline elements. So inline elements means that you can add it within the P tag. You can add, strong within. Strong elements are both inline elements used within paragraphs, and they can't be outside. It has to be within. Okay. Now let's move on to another tag, right? This is an interesting one. This is called the anchor tag. Okay. A is short for anchor. This is how you use the anchor tag. So essentially what happens is you can use this A tag, the anchor tag, to basically do two things, right? So the first thing is you can point to a different location on the same page, right? So you can point, like, I'm sure you guys have seen landing pages where you have like, nav items on the nav bar, and you can click on an item and then the page kind of just scrolls automatically to a certain part of the page. That is basically using the A tag, right? Or if you click on the A tag, it'll open up in a new browser. Okay, so that's basically how this A tag works. Now, you'll be surprised to see that Netflix actually uses the button. It's not a button element, right? It's just an A tag. Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to create our A tag for the first time, right? So I'm not going to manually create it deliberately because I need to show you guys something, right? So this is sign in. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to open up the page, and you can see sign in appears here. But what is the job of sign in? When I click on sign in, I want it to open the sign in page, right? So for example, if I click over here, I'm just going to open it in a new tab. If I click on sign in, it's going to open up this login page for me, right? So I want that to happen. Even in our clone project, I actually want that to happen. But how do we do that, right? Like looking at the elements, like we have the opening tag, we have the closing tag, and that's the element. How would we how would HTML know how to, go to that particular page when this link is clicked on, right? There's no way to know. So that brings us to a new concept, which is actually called attributes, right? So every element can actually have attributes, okay? And attributes are normally given within the opening tag. So this is where any extra information goes, okay? So for example, if we wanted to be pointed to the Netflix login page, within the A tag over here, we have to add something called the href attribute. So this is an attribute, right? Meaning that we're giving this element, we're giving this anchor element some more information, saying that, hey, like if you click on the sign in button, browser, please make sure that you open up this login page, this Netflix login page, right? So that's what this does. So we have to use this href attribute, which is with an equal sign. And then you have this opening quotation mark and closing quotation mark. And then we have the link that is placed in between that, okay? Now let us actually do this. So we basically have this login page over here. And then I'm going to actually add this href attribute. So href, and then I'm going to paste it. And then you can see that I basically have the login page there now. Now, a cool thing I want you guys to also take note of, if I just type A and hit enter, it'll automatically generate the required attributes for this element. So this is actually a required attribute, which we'll be talking about, but it automatically generates it. And I can just paste it there, and then I can type sign in. I'm just going to delete that, and then I'm going to hit save. And now you'll see that it looks slightly different, okay? So it's going to have like a little link there now. So I can see that if I just zoom in a little bit, it has a little bit of an underline, and the color looks slightly different, like, a link that's been clicked on already. So if I click on this right now, you'll see that it actually opens up the Netflix login page, which is exactly what Netflix does, right? Which is awesome, which is really cool. That's like, getting closer to like the actual functionality of the original Netflix, right? So that's basically the anchor tag, okay? And the href attribute gives this anchor element more information on what to do when you click on the sign in button, okay? Awesome. Now, some elements require attributes. So for example, this particular anchor element requires this href attribute because it's useless. Like you can't use the A element. You saw that initially when we didn't use the href attribute, it was just normal text, right? The moment we added href, it had like a link. It basically looked like a link that you could click on. So that's why the href attribute is extremely important. Now, there's something to also note that this will not work if you use an HTTP. Like without using HTTP or HTTPS, the link is not going to work. So if I just come to this and just remove this HTTPS and just put www.netflix.com, it's not going to open the page that you want, right? You need to add the HTTP or the HTTPS, and that is known as an absolute path. So absolute path means that this is the exact link that we're getting from the browser. We're just putting it. Now, you might have observed, like in Netflix over here, right? You cannot actually see the HTTPS and www and stuff. But when I click on it and copy it, and I come over here and I paste it, right? You can see that we actually have www and we have all this information. So that's why Chrome is really helpful. I recommend that you guys use Chrome for coding along, okay? I'm sure that it's the same in Safari and other browsers as well. But yeah, basically, that's just something to note. You'll still get the absolute path, even though it doesn't look like an absolute path over there. So absolute path means that it has the HTTPS and HTTP. Awesome. Now, like an absolute path, where we can point to an external link, we can also point to files within our same project. And this is known as a relative path, okay? So basically, this allows us to point to files locally in the project. Now, let me give you guys an example right before I jump into it. So what I'll do is over here, I'm just going to create a new file. And I'm going to call this about us.html, okay? And then inside aboutus.html, I'm going to use type exclamation mark and hit enter. It'll generate the template code for me. And then I'm just going to say Netflix about us. And then I'm just going to add a heading over here, about us page. Okay, we're not going to be coding the about us page. I just want to show you guys the concept right now. I'm just going to save the file. And then inside our project over here, I'm just going to add another A tag, right? And then you can see href automatically was generated here. And I'm just going to call this about us, right? And if I hit save and this page loads, you can see that we have this about us thing, but it won't do anything if you click on it. It's just going to load the same page, right? And that's not what we want, right? Essentially, what we want to do is we want it to open our about us page, right? So basically what we'll do is we'll use something known as a relative path. So over here in sign in, we use an absolute path. Over here now we'll be using a relative path. So a relative path means that we want to point this this link, like we want to us.html such that when we click on this about us, it opens this about us.html file, right? What we have to do is just give the location of where is this about us file so that the browser knows that, you know, it's looking for this particular about us file. So what I'll do is normally you use dot basically means that, you know, we're checking in the current root directory. And then if I do slash, it'll tell me, it'll give me options. That's why VS Code is again really awesome. It tells you, like, you know, the options of what file you want to point to. And I just want to point to about us.html. I can hit enter, right? And if I save that and I go back over here, page is loading, it's saved. If I click on it, you can see that it opened the about us page, right? Which is awesome, right? That's basically what we wanted. The point I'm trying to get across over here, guys, is we have the absolute path over here, right? And we have the relative path over here. That's the main difference to take away. Relative path allows you to point to a project within this, allows you to point to a file within the same project, whereas absolute path allows you to point to some sort of HTTP link, right? So that's basically the main point to take away from here. Awesome. So that's basically the A tag. And yeah, I already talked about this. The dot means that we're in the current folder, and then slash assets will allow us to access files, right? So we can actually use, you know, we can actually access assets with a different element called the image element. So let me just do that real quick. If I type img, right? Img basically means image, right? So we'll be able to, if I hit enter, you can see that it has two required attributes, source and alt. So if this throws you off, please don't worry. We'll be covering this in proper detail. But the point I want to show over here is you can use relative paths, right? So if I do dot, it means I'm in the current folder. Slash means, you know, check the current folder, and then go inside assets. And then inside assets, I want to, let me just use BG image, right? And if I hit save, you'll see that this image has appeared over here, right? So we have the sign in up there, and then we have this image that has appeared over here, okay? So that's basically relative paths. It allows you to point to files within this particular project, okay? Extremely useful. Awesome. So something that personally, I added this because I feel like this is really helpful information. Normally when you click on a link, right, I prefer that it opens up in a new tab so that, you know, users are not disturbed by the user experience, right? So basically what I'll do is I'm going to add this attribute. So in this sign in part, I'm going to say target underscore blank and then hit save, right? And target underscore blank will basically allow us to open this link not on the same page. So before it was opening on the same page, like this page was disappearing and the new login page was appearing, but now it's going to open in a new tab, right? So that's, I personally feel like that's a really cool thing. And how you do that is you use the target attribute, which is an optional attribute. It's not required. And you use underscore blank. So the browser understands that when you click on the sign in anchor element, it'll open this link, the link that is provided in a new page, right? So that's basically how to open items in a new page. Extremely useful, guys. And yeah, so here's the image element, okay? So similar to the anchor element, which requires the href attribute to work, the image element requires this src source attribute to work, right? src is the short form for source, okay? And you can see that we can use the relative paths over here as well. And just something that I want you guys to notice, if we look at all our elements over here, we have an opening tag and we have a closing tag, right? Opening tag, closing tag. But if you look at image, it actually doesn't have a closing tag. It's known as self-closing. So image is a self-closing element, and you only have the image tag and you don't actually have a closing tag, right? And now the reason it's self-closing, it's because we're not providing any information in between like this that's going to display in the browser, but rather we're providing that information as required attributes. So the source attribute that has a relative path over here. Okay, so it's actually self-closing. Awesome. Now file paths, similar to the anchor tag, similar to using href, we can use absolute paths or we can use relative paths. Okay, so I've already showed you guys how you can use this relative paths over here. We can, do dots. Dot means the current folder, slash means check the current folder, and then VS Code is gonna look at what you have, and then you can hit enter on assets, and then you can load whatever image that's there. Okay, and then you can also use an absolute path using HTTPS. Okay, this is really cool stuff, guys. Now the next thing is the alt attribute. So in the image element, we have two attributes, right? We have src and we have alt, right? Now alt attribute is normally used to describe an image. Okay, now why is this important? This is really important, especially for screen readers, right? So for people who cannot actually see, right, they need some sort of way to actually understand what elements on the screen or what elements are there on the screen. So the alt attribute essentially gives that information so that screen readers can read out what elements on the screen are on the screen. So you can see that the Netflix over here, we can actually give an alt, we can give additional information, and we can say that this is actually the Netflix cover image, right? And that's basically the alt attribute. So you can see that it's still going to work if it's an empty tag, but I think it's really important that you use the alt attribute, just to give it that additional information. So Harjot, do you want to maybe add on like a little bit about SEO over here?
Yeah, man. Like, so SEO is like very important when you're creating websites. You want people to actually see your website. It needs to appear on Google. And how does Google even know what an image is? And that's where the alt attribute actually comes in. It tells search engines what that image is about. And that's why this alt attribute is very critical for SEO. You don't have to put it on logos and stuff, but let's say you're describing some image, you've got an image and you, someone who can read, who can see, can easily interpret that image. You want the same thing to happen for a search engine. So that's where the alt attribute actually comes in. Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, so I mean, I'm just looking at the chat right now. I see there are a few questions. So the first question I see is, what extensions are you using for the auto-completion suggestions? So for HTML, it's something called Emmet, right? So shout out to Martin, by the way. Shout out, man. Good to see you here. But basically, Emmet is already installed by default in the VS Code, and it automatically does the autocomplete for you. Okay. Now the next question is, what about the area that says get started? Don't worry about that. We'll be covering that like in a lot more detail. Like right now, we're just focusing on HTML concepts. But this will make a lot more sense as we jump into CSS. You'll be surprised, guys. Like, don't worry, we will get through a lot of the application. Don't worry that it looks horrible right now, but it's gonna look good soon. Okay, trust the process. Okay. And then Aaron says, what was that shortcut again? So I'm assuming that you're talking about the Emmet shortcut to actually create a file. So the shortcut is basically you just type exclamation mark and it'll give you two options. And I normally just select the first option, and it generates template code for you. Okay, so that's basically the shortcut. And yeah, I guess the rest are admin questions that have been answered. Awesome, guys. Now moving on. Yeah, we talked about the image element. It's really similar to the anchor element. The only difference is that it's self-closing and it uses a different required attribute called src, right? And yeah, let's talk a little bit about lists. Okay, now lists, there's regular bulleted lists or numbered lists. So a list means, like, if you want to add elements, let me show you guys an example of a list actually. So on the Netflix page over here, on the main Netflix page, I'm just going to close that. So on the main Netflix page over here, I'm just going to disable all styles. And then you'll be able to see that we have all these different elements over here. We have a list over here at the bottom. Now, how would we show this list? We would show this list using something called the HTML list, right? So HTML list element, okay? So that's what a list would look like. A list can be bulleted. It can be just like, regular bullets, or it can be a numbered list. So it can be like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So it's really useful for navigation. So as you can see, Netflix actually uses lists for navigation, right? Which is really cool. Now there's two types of lists. So it's ordered lists. Ordered lists means like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like we're giving some order to the list. And then there's unordered lists. OL for ordered lists, UL for unordered lists. So as the name suggests, unordered lists are basically just the bullet points, right? And you can, using CSS, you can change what those bullets look like, right? So yeah, so that's basically that. Let's actually add this stuff to our page. So what I'll do is inside our index.html, I'm just going to, I guess, under about us, I'm just going to add this list, right? So UL means unordered list. I want to add an unordered list. Hit enter again, because I want to add list items. So basically, you can see that in between the unordered list, we can add list items. So we add list items using li, right? So if I do li, list item, right, I can type FAQ, and then I can type help center, and then if I hit save, and we go to a project, let's see what this list looks like. You can see that it appears down there, and that's what it looks like, right? You can see that the bullets have appeared down there. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see that it looks like that, okay? Now, yeah, so basically what you can do is you can copy all these elements and then you can add it, right? So for example, right now, what I'll do is I'll add all these elements here, right? Like that. And I'll use one of, oops, I don't know what I just did. I'll just use VS Code's one really cool trick, right? So you can actually create multiple cursors using, I think it's Alt, yeah. So I'm just creating multiple cursors right now. And if you can guess what I'm about to do, I'm just going to type li in all these places. So li, and then it's going to generate the closing tag for me. I'm going to close that, and then I'm going to go to the end and then hit paste, right? So I copied it, hit paste, and then I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to press escape, and then all the LIs, all the cursors are going to disappear. Okay, so that's a cool trick you can use. You don't have to know this, guys. You can just manually add that for now. But yeah, it's a really cool trick. I recommend that you rewind the video and check it out if you didn't get it. But it's not that important. Cool. So that's basically how you create lists, right? So if I just change this to OL up here, and I change this to OL just to show you guys what an ordered list looks like, you can see that it's just 1 to 15, just numbers, right? I'm just going to leave it as UL, hit save, and that's what I want it to be. Okay, awesome. So that's lists. And yeah, last thing, I guess I want to talk about commenting code, right? So it's really important that you comment your code for two reasons. So the first thing is it really helps when you're collaborating with other developers, right? So when Harjot and I collaborate, we've worked on countless projects together. We make it a point to comment our code, because sometimes what tends to happen is, Harjot might start off with something and I might have to carry on from where he left off. And then he comments his code so that I can understand what he has written, what he was trying to do, understand his thought process, right? So that's basically an example of how important it is to comment your code. Another example, another occasion when I use commenting code is like to omit elements from rendering in the browser. So for example, if I want to commit this code over here, comment this code over here, what I'll do is using VS Code, you can do command/ if you have Mac, or control/ if you have Windows, and then it'll generate this for you, right? It'll like look slightly different. And then how you comment code in HTML is open angle bracket, exclamation mark, dash dash, and then the text, and then dash dash, close angle bracket. So I don't even remember the syntax, guys. Basically, I just use command/ to comment the code. And the reason I'm commenting this code is I don't want this to appear in our Netflix project, because this is not on the Netflix page, right? So about us is now going to be disappeared from our browser. Like we cannot see about us in our browser anymore, right? But in our code, it's still there. So in case in future, if I want like, if I want to reuse this or something, it's going to be there. So those are the two reasons why I use commenting code for. So Aaron is saying, send the list. Sure, I'm just going to drop the list, this whole thing in the chat. I'm not sure if it's going to work. Okay, so too many characters. YouTube isn't allowing me. I'm going to have to send this in bits and pieces, guys. So I'm just going to send
don't worry about that. We're just going to push the code on Git, and then everyone can have access to the code.
Awesome. So yeah, guys, basically, just to sum things up, that was basic HTML. We use Visual Studio Code. It's really helpful for programming. Like as we jump into CSS, like Harjot and I use it for React. It's like awesome. Like VS Code is like your go-to editor, okay? Can't emphasize that enough. Then we talked about headings. So those are HTML elements to write headings. And then there's paragraphs. And then you can give some sort of, you can give text importance using the strong tag, or you can use the EM tag to give it emphasis so that you can make it italic. The anchor tag allows you to, like the sign-in button we use for anchor. When we click on the sign-in button, it opens in a new tab. So that's an example of a sign-in anchor tag. And then anchor tags have a compulsory attribute. The concept of attribute is just to give elements some additional information. And it's the additional information is basically like, the browser asking, dude, where do you want to point this code to? Like, well, when I click on this element, where should I point this to? So that's basically what href does. So there's absolute paths. You can use absolute paths, you can use relative paths, right? And then there's the img tag, which stands for image. It's self-closing, and similar to the anchor tag, it uses the source, the src tag, src attribute. So similar to the anchor element, it uses the source attribute instead of the href attribute to point to elements, right? And then code can be commented using command / or control / on your VS Code, right? So that brings us to the end of HTML. We will still be covering more HTML concepts, and like Harjot and I will be doing a whole lot more CSS in the next one. But yeah, over to you, Harjot, to go over the CSS basics.
Awesome, man. I mean, we have another 45 minutes, so I guess we can just take like a short 2-minute break, just for everyone to relax, get some water, and then we'll jump right into CSS. That's the real stuff,
I need
all
water,
we're doing the boring stuff. That's what Akil does. He does the boring stuff. I'm coming in with the fun CSS stuff.
Come on,
the real Netflix.
Nah, I agree with Harjot, guys. CSS is the real fun stuff. Like initially it was like super, like I used to find CSS extremely tedious. But I hope this workshop simplifies things for you guys. It'll make a whole lot more sense. So yeah, we actually have a small activity here. So it's break time, guys. Tell us about your craziest celebrity encounter. So we've heard some of the funniest stories, and I'd love to hear some stories from you guys. I mean, I can start off with the story. So I had a celebrity encounter, but I actually didn't recognize who the celebrity was, so which is really embarrassing. So basically, I was on my way to Cape Town, and I saw this guy sitting in business class, and I was like, I've seen this guy somewhere. It looks really familiar, and I just walked past because I couldn't recognize him. And basically, turns out that guy was like a celebrity. His name is Murli Sharma. He's come in a lot of Hindi movies and also a lot of South Indian movies. And yeah, it's just crazy, how I was there and I could have just met the guy, got a photo with him, but I didn't realize it was him. So that was a crazy experience. So Dhruv is asking, are we doing JavaScript today? No, we're not doing JavaScript today. It's just purely focused on HTML and CSS.
Vivek says Virat Kohli. So did you actually meet Virat Kohli? What happened? Akil, do you wanna just push your code to GitHub?
Yeah, I'm doing that.
So that everyone else can update their code. We're all on the same page, and then we can get started with CSS. Saha says the actor of original Red Power Rangers was hanging out with my dad, and he had no idea. He later followed me on Instagram. What? Does he still follow you? Wow, that's crazy.
Dude, that is
Dude,
so
he actually
cool, dude.
met Virat Kohli.
Oh, he
man.
unfollowed you. Oh my gosh, I'm so
Wow.
sorry. That sucks. Hey Vivek, that's really cool, man. Yeah, that's amazing. Like I really look up to Virat Kohli. Like he really inspires me. It's awesome that you know, you got to meet the man. That's freaking crazy, man.
Sahan, don't worry about him unfollowing you. You can follow us, we'll follow you back.
Yeah, guys, and we will probably never unfollow you because it's too much effort to go and unfollow people.
Yeah, he's a great
Yeah,
man.
What a legend. What a legend. Yeah.
Virat Kohli is a legend.
Why is everyone typing F, guys?
Yeah.
Like, what's cooking here, Harris? Like, what's going on, dude? Like,
I have no idea.
False, true.
I'm also going to type
SRH. Hyderabad, that's the Sunrise Hyderabad, that's IPL team. By the way, Akil follows IPL.
Yeah, guys, I follow IPL. And yeah, I mean, like, F to pay respect.
Right, I see.
Oh, it's a gamer meme. Okay. Nah, guys, I don't support Sunrisers Hyderabad. Although I am from Hyderabad, I don't really support them. Actually, I was supporting you know, Kings 11 Punjab and Delhi Capitals. I'm glad, you know, Delhi Capitals made it because I want the underdogs to win. They've never won before. Okay, that's why I'm supporting them. Unfortunately, Punjab didn't make it through. You know, my condolences. You know, they gave a good fight the entire tournament.
They tried. Even though I didn't watch a single match, I was supporting in Kings 11 Punjab as well. I'm from Punjab, that's why.
Yeah, shout out to KL, Rahul, and the squad. You know, they gave good fights, close games they could have won. But yeah, Harjot, I pushed the code.
Let's do this, man.
Yeah,
let's do this.
Let's do some CSS. Yeah,
That's
I'm gonna start
right.
sharing my screen.
Just gonna share my screen now. Cool. So Akil just pushed his code to Git, and everyone can now download it from Git as well using the same method. You basically go and click on the code and download a zip. I'm just gonna git pull from master. If we have time towards the end of the workshop, maybe second workshop, we'll probably go over Git. That didn't work. Git pull origin master. And I should get all the code that Akil has done. Yay. So I've got the index.html file, aboutus.html file. So everyone, if you could just go download this folder again and open it in VS Code, then we're all on the same page to start CSS. So I'm just going to open it in live server so that I've set up everything. Okay, that works well. I'm just going to set it up properly. So I've got my Netflix, the HTML file open in a live server. I've got my code open. I'm just gonna close the console here and close this. Yeah, cool. Let's get started. The real stuff, CSS, the fun stuff. So we'll be going through like the basic syntax and the various things, the various concepts in CSS, and we'll just go over the basic concepts that are required to build the Netflix landing page. So if you can actually build a Netflix landing page, you can literally just build so many different other types of websites. So we'll go over just enough for you to build a web page. So the basic syntax is CSS has something called selector. This helps us select. So what happens is CSS styles what is there in HTML. So HTML has those elements, those tags, H1, H2, H3 tags. How does CSS know what to style? That's where the selector comes in. So the selector basically selects the tag. So H1 is the tag in HTML, and we're selecting H1. And then you open curly brackets. So the next thing is you open curly brackets, and inside the curly bracket is where the whole CSS declaration goes in. So just going back, CSS is not a programming language. It's a style sheet format. So yeah, don't be mistaken and call it a language. And what we do inside this is you declare CSS properties. So if you want to change the color of a font, or you want to change the font size, or you want to add a width or height to something, you declare it by adding the property. So these properties are default in CSS. And then the value is something that we can change. So you can make it blue, red, whatever color you want. You can change the size. Pixels is basically each pixel on your screen is 1 pixel. So 10 pixels on your screen. That's how you actually declare CSS code. And then how do you actually add CSS into HTML? There are actually 3 ways. The first one is inline CSS. Then we have internal CSS and then external CSS. So I'm going to go through all 3 of them. The first one is inline CSS. And what we do over here is we basically define all the CSS code inside the style attribute of an element. And what I mean by that is, let's say h1 is an element. Akil creates that h1 element. I'm going to create a style attribute. And inside the style attribute, inside the columns, I'm going to add the CSS code, declare it using, let's say if I want to change the font color, I'll use the declaration color and change the color to blue. And we usually use this to apply styles on a unique tag, but it's not best practice. Imagine you have so much of HTML code, like a whole page of HTML code, then you add some CSS inside the HTML code, you're mixing HTML with CSS, then you have multiple files. These days, web pages are massive. You might end up having multiple files. So your CSS codes gets really messy. Your code gets really messy, and in the future, it's really hard to scale it. It's not efficient. So it's not good practice, but I'm still going to show you how this actually works. So Akil created, let me just remove this image for the meantime so that we can just focus on the styling. So I'm just going to remove it, save, and Akil created all these tags in HTML. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a style attribute inside the h1 tag and declare color, change the color to, let's say, red. And when I save it, it automatically updates the color of the entire h1 tag, the content of the h1 tag to red. And that's how inline style works. So I can add multiple style by adding a semicolon. We separate the declarations by semicolons, and you add the second style. So let's say if I want to add the font size, I want to change the font size to something ridiculously big, 70 pixels maybe. And if I save that, the font size increases. So this is basically inline style, but it's not good practice. Don't use this. If it's something very small, maybe go for it. But I recommend not to go for this. The second way of adding CSS to HTML is using internal styles. And the styles are basically defined inside the style element in the head section of HTML. So Akil went over the head section where I think he added the title, he added the meta tags, and yeah. So he basically mentioned that anything added over here will not appear in HTML. And that's where we actually add the CSS styling. So you open the style tag inside the head element and then add all your styling inside it. So I'm going to do that now, just show you how it works. I'm going to remove all the inline styling from h1, make sure there's no styling in the HTML page. I'm going to create a style element inside the head section and add a selector. Let's say I want the h2 to be styled. So I'm going to type h2, open curly brackets. Inside the curly brackets, I'm going to change the color to blue. Then you close it off with a semicolon you can go to the next line, add more styles to it. So if I want to change the font size to something very small, like 5 pixels, or that's going to be very small, 10 pixels, and close it off. And when I save, that changes into something really small, 10 pixels. I think that's not a good example. Let me rather make it bigger, so you can actually see the font size and font color being applied. So this was basically inline styles. Let's bring my slides nearby. Cool. And we usually use this if you only have one HTML page, and which is not the case. You never have one single HTML page these days. If you're even creating a portfolio of yourself, I don't know, whichever website, it's very rare to have a single HTML page which contains all the HTML code inside it. You usually have multiple pages, like an About Us section, terms and conditions section. So you'll have multiple pages. So it's very unlikely to use internal CSS. And now, my favorite, external CSS, mostly used, this concept is used in different frameworks as well, like React. What we do is we create an external file, save it as a .css file, which is basically the cascading style sheet file, and add all the CSS code inside it. And then we'll link that with the HTML page using the link element, the link tag, and create a relationship of style sheet. So a link tag has something called relationship, and we call it style sheet, so that the HTML page can recognize the link tag as a style sheet. So I'm going to go give you an example how that works. The link tag is actually placed inside the header section. So I'm going to go to the header section. I'm going to remove the style, save that, make sure there's no styling inside, and create a link tag. So VS Code is cool. I'm just going to type link and enter, and that it will create the entire syntax for me. So REL stands for relationship. It's telling HTML that we're linking a style sheet file. Before we do that, I need to create the style sheet file. So I'm going to just right click inside right click on top of the folder, create new file, and save it as styles.css. You can call it anything, but it needs to end with .css. So style.css, I'm just going to call it styles. Good practice. And using the path method that Akhil mentioned earlier, so I'm just going to do / that tells me the various files inside my folder. I'm going to select styles.css. So I'm basically telling HTML that I've got a style sheet. It's placed here. Can you please attach it so that when you render it in the web page, it also loads the styles that are inside that file. To test this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the same code h2, change the color to, let's say, purple. So CSS has default colors, so it has multiple default colors, and as you can see, each color has its own code. Akhil, I forgot what you call this code. Is it hexa?
Yeah,
hexa, and yeah, so you can basically just type in that code, or you can type in that code, or you can just type in the name of the color, and CSS will recognize that. So I'm going to select the purple color. It's my favorite. I'm going to save that, and let's see if it works. So it did actually work. It did change to purple. The h2 tag did change to purple. So we can confirm that the styles.css is now linked with the HTML CSS. So any code that goes inside the styles.css will appear inside index.html when rendering. Cool. Now, the cool part is you can have multiple style sheets. How amazing is that? You don't have to add all your CSS code inside styles of CSS. You can break it down. Let's say you want to create the same web page for a mobile phone, a small screen, and then there's a large screen. You want to change the color in a large screen. Let's say the large screen font color needs to be red, and a small screen font color needs to be purple. So we can do that. We can separate CSS styling using multiple style sheets. So how you do that is it's simple. You create another file as it is. I'm just going to call it responsive for a mobile phone. That's how I want it to be broken down. So all mobile phone styles go inside responsive.css, and all my large screen styles go inside styles of CSS. So inside responsive.css, I've created that. And now I'm going to link it in a similar way as I did previously. I'm just going to link it again. I'm going to say, I'm going to look for that file and links responsive.css. One thing to note in multiple style sheet is that if you have the same styling in both, so if you have the H2 selector in both files, the bottom link file, the bottom link CSS file will overwrite the top CSS file. So let me check if this thing is working first. I'm gonna style the H1 tag and I'm gonna change the color to blue and save that. And all H1 tags change the color to blue. So that works. We can confirm that works. Now what I'm going to do is styles of CSS has the purple color in H2 tag. And as you can see, responsive.css is below styles of CSS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to style H2 inside responsive.css, and I'm going to say color to red. So this is supposed, I'm expecting it to overwrite it. And as you can see, it does actually overwrite. And so if you see errors coming up with multiple style sheet, just note that the bottom style sheet overwrites the top style sheet. Cool. So I'm just going to remove this now. I'm going to remove all the styling, making sure there's no styling available here. And now the next thing is a fav icon. So if you noticed Netflix, so I'm just going to open Netflix again. I think I'm logged in. Yeah, oh, I'm actually not logged in. So there's that logo up there, the Netflix logo. That it makes it look legit, you know. So for example, over here, there's no logo and it looks really fake. How do you add that fav icon? You use that using the link tag again. So I'm going to create a link tag, and instead of saying style sheet as a relationship, I'm going to tell HTML it's actually a fav, it's actually an icon. So the relationship is supposed to be an icon, and HTML will basically add the icon on the web page. So I'm going to change style sheet to icon, and inside href, that's where the URL goes. I'm going to select the file / I've already downloaded the fav icon. You should also have it. It's inside the assets folder, and then favicon.png. Now, if I save, you'll notice that the Netflix logo appears next to Netflix Brunel. It's the same as the real Netflix landing page. Amazing. So if you don't really open the page, it looks like a real Netflix page that is opened up. Cool. Now, so I went over selected. So just going back, we mentioned that the syntax of CSS contains a selector. That's how you select an HTML element or tag. There are actually multiple ways you can select a tag or element inside an HTML. So the first one we went through was basically so there are actually multiple types of selectors. The first one is simple selector, combinator selector, pseudo class selectors. There are actually like so many types of selectors. These are just ways you can select an element inside HTML. So we're just going to go over simple selectors and maybe just touch over pseudo element selectors in this bootcamp. And the rest you'll just learn with time. So for the beginning, the simple selector that we actually went over is an element selector. That's what we've been using so far. So what an element selector does is it selects the tags inside HTML. So these H1 tags, A tags, H3 tags, all these are elements inside HTML. So what you do is you basically call that, add that selector and open the curly brackets, add your CSS code. We just went over that. The second way is using an ID selector. I haven't used this. What we do over here is you create an ID attribute inside that HTML element, and you you call it something, and then inside CSS, the syntax is basically you write a hash character, put that ID name, and add your CSS code. I'm going to go over that now. So what I mean by an ID attribute is, let's say I want to, there are actually two h1 tags over here. I just want the second h1 tag to be styled. So I'm going to create an ID attribute, and inside the attribute, I'm going to say this is a subtitle. Okay. And now I'm just going to close responsive CSS. All my styles will go inside styles of CSS. I'm going to create the ID selector here. It's hash followed by the selector, the ID name, which was subtitle. And then it's the same CSS code. You open the curly brackets, add the CSS code inside it, change color to red, and that will just change the CSS of that particular element we added the ID to. And the thing about ID is it only applies to a unique element. You cannot repeat the same ID again and again. Let's say if I add ID to H2 here, HTML will, okay, that is weird. That actually worked for some reason. I'm not quite sure why that worked. Akhil, do you have a reason? Because ID only works on unique elements. I'm not sure why ID went for.
Because I think it's because it's the first element on the page. So it'll apply on the first element of the page, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to do, but it also applied to the second element, which is weird. It defeats the purpose of ID.
Yeah.
Eh?
I mean, I think it will work, so but it's just not good practice. Yeah.
It's not good practice, yeah. So ID is for unique elements. But to solve that problem, sometimes you want to use the same styles again and again. It's like repeating the same styles. You don't want to type color red again and again. What we use is the classes selector. So you can create a class using a peer character followed by a class name, and then use that class name inside a class attribute in an HTML element. Too many complex words. I'm going to show you how it actually works. So inside styles of CSS, I'm going to remove this ID now, and I'm just going to keep the classes. So it's the peer character followed by a class name. Let's say I want a class where the font size is 70 pixels. So I'm going to create a large font, call the class name a large font, and add the CSS code inside it. So font size is 70 pixels. And that's the class created. Now I can reuse this class again and again. So in H1, I'm going to add the class attribute, and inside the class attribute, I'm going to call the class name, which is LG fonts. Let me just confirm that's what I put. Yes, that's what I put. And if I save it, it will change the font size of H1 to 70 pixels. Good part is you can reuse this again and again. So if I want H3 to be changed, I'm going to add a class attribute, and inside class, I'm going to add the LG font class name. And if I save, H3 attribute, the H3 element increases the font size. Another cool thing about classes is you can use multiple classes inside. You can add more than one class names or classes inside an element. So let me create another class called, let's say I want font red, and color will be red, right? I can add two classes to the same element. So how you do that is you add a space after the first class and add the class name. You can add as many class names as you want, 2, 3, 4, and that's the cool part. So that's how classes are used in HTML. The next one is grouping selectors. So we went over the classes, how you can reuse classes, but what if you want to add the same styling to multiple tags in an HTML? How would you do that? So you can group HTML elements together using commas. So you you want to style the P tag, the H1 tag, the H2 tag, you just separate them by commas, add the CSS styling, and all those HTML tags will be styled. And then we have something called a universal selector. So what a universal selector does is it selects all the elements in the HTML page and adds a default CSS styling to it. So let's say I want the font size of the entire page to be, let's say, 20 pixels. Unless I've overwritten it using a class, I can do that using the universal selector. So you basically use the star character followed by the curly brackets, and inside the curly brackets, I want all the elements inside the HTML page to have a font size of 20 pixels. Cool. Now, if I save, and I'm sure you saw that the font size actually increased. Let me just do that one more time. The font size is actually much smaller. Now, when I add the font size increases. And that's how a universal selector works. So universal selector is really helpful when you want to style all the elements inside HTML at once. You can overwrite it by adding classes, multiple classes or IDs. You can use ID classes together or tags, all of them together in one file. That's completely acceptable. Cool. And then we have CSS comment. So Akhil mentioned how important CSS comments are inside HTML. It's the same thing in CSS. What I usually do is, so you basically use the syntax / star, you add your CSS. But what I usually do is you highlight whatever you want to comment, command / or control / and Visual Studio will comment it out. It's that simple. So that's basically CSS font. As you saw, I commented it out. Everything went to default because there's no styling left. So I've basically removed the styling. Cool. Now Akhil will go over div tag and create an actual structure of how the Netflix landing page is looking, create a structure for our HTML page as well, and then we can jump right into styling it further. Akhil, over to you.
Awesome.
I'm just gonna push my code, quickly.
Yeah, please push your code, yeah. Let me share my screen. Have you pushed the code?
Cool. It's almost done. Yeah. So I've pushed my code. Everyone can now access the latest code from Git. So if you go back to GitHub, download the code, you'll be able to see the styles of CSS and responsive.css files also created for you. So if you miss some part in CSS, I haven't gone much, I haven't created much code. I'm basically going to delete everything and start all over for CSS, but you can come to the same page by downloading code now.
Awesome, thanks, man. So basically, I'm just going to open with live server again, and you can see that the changes that Harjot has made, and like you can see that the sizes are the same for all the heading tags and stuff. So yeah, guys, now we'll be jumping into a concept called divs, which is basically stands for division, right? So now divs become extremely crucial when you want to style elements, right? Because normally how it works, if that's terrible. So when you look at the Netflix landing page, you can firstly see that there's different sections, right? Different sections look different, right? Now, why divs are extremely helpful is it helps you structure the elements that helps you style it easily. So like, for example, over here, there's a nav bar, right? This nav bar basically has two elements, and these two elements is like the logo and the sign in button, and they're all pushed apart. Now, if we create a div like a division for this particular element, like, create that section, it allows us to style it easily because it creates like use something to push the elements to the ends, right? So that's why divs are extremely powerful and extremely crucial, especially like when it comes to styling, right? So, I mean, Harjot will be covering Flexbox. So Flexbox is what's going to be used to, push these elements to the end, and then like, add this element over here, one under the other, put it in the center, putting the element in the center as here and low here, and then the left and the right. So centering the element, you've got to put it in a div, right? So it helps with layout and structure of elements, okay? So let's actually use this. Let's actually add some divs into our Netflix project, okay? So I'm just going to start off by like, there's firstly this big outer div, right? So the big outer div is the banner wrap. So you can see that there's like a background over there, right? There's a background image, and on top of the background image, there's like some overlay. So like you imported the image before and there was no color, and we're using some sort of overlay here. And with the overlay, on top of the overlay, so the overlay is kind of black and like, it's transparent. It gives that nice dark effect. And on top of that overlay, we have like all these elements appearing, right? So basically what I'm thinking is we should have like, an outer div. And now a cool way to create divs as well in VS Code is you can use div dot, and then you can put the class name. So as Harjot said, you can use the class selectors, which we'll probably be using throughout this whole project, or you could just do dot banner. I'm just going to call it banner wrap, right? Just the outer element, right? And then inside the banner wrap, you have the nav bar. And why do we have a nav bar? You can see that we have this image on the left-hand side over here, and then we have this logo, the sign-in button on the right-hand side over here. So I'm just creating a section for that particular area. Now, if we want to understand how Netflix created their sections, right? Google Chrome allows us to do that. So if we right-click and we click on inspect, right? So you right-click and then click on inspect, and you'll see that we can see how Netflix has done it. So you can see Netflix has a whole bunch of divs, right? So you can see that they've created a div for the header up there, right? They've called it our story header. And then inside that, they have created the logo and so on, right? So similarly, we'll also create like a nav bar. And then inside the nav bar, we can actually add like, the logo, and then we can actually add the button, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div for the logo as well. So normally it doesn't matter, like the divs actually, they're almost negligible in the sense that they do not take up space, right? Yes, they do have a default property of block, which we'll be covering, but they do not really take up space. So we can add the image to fill up the div and so on, right? So I'm just going to add an image right now, and I'm just going to import the logo, right? So the logo is inside assets, and then logo.png, and then I'm just going to say Netflix logo, right? So the logo is going to appear there. And then under that, we're going to have the sign-in button, right? So we're putting it under it, right? But you see over here, we have it like, spread out apart. So there are ways to like, put the elements in a row and then spread the elements and put them wide apart, right? So we're just sectioning them out right now. I'm just going to create at the A over here. So you can imagine how we'll separate out these elements, right? So we're going to look at the navbar class, and then we're going to give that a class of like, a row so that it appears in a row. And then we're going to separate out the logo element and this A element so that it's, on the two sides, right? So that's basically how like, we can, give the structure for the navbar. And then after that, we can create, let's see what we can do. So what Netflix has done is, I'm just trying to see what they've done. So they've created like, a whole container outside here, right? So they've created this whole container, right? So similarly, we'll create a container as well under navbar. So under navbar, we're going to have banner container. Okay, so now this is really important, right? Because we have the nav. So as like, just to recap, banner wrap has like, the background, we're gonna add the overlay and so on. And then we have the logo that is in the nav bar. We have the A tag, which is in the nav bar. And then under the nav bar, we want to have this other div that takes up this amount of like, big amount of space so that we can put elements in the center, right? Then what I'll do is I'm going to add H1. I'm just going to copy these lines actually. H1 and H2. I'm going to add it over here. I'm just going to remove these styles for now. We'll be styling it later. I'm going to give it an empty class for now. And then you can see that we have unlimited movies, TV shows, and more. Then I just want to check the slides real quick. So we're jumping into CSS properties. Okay. Yeah, so basically what I'm thinking, right, is inside over here, there are a few elements that we can also add, right? But we'll be covering that after Harjot does some styling. So what I'll do is I'm just going to add these this H3 tag up here as well. Okay, I'm just going to remove this, that style. And then, yeah, so that's the banner container. And then you can see that we also have like an input tag, and then we have a button. What I'll do is I'll go through this right now. I'm briefly going to type the code for you guys, but we'll cover the concepts in detail shortly, right? So if you type form, right, form essentially is an HTML element that allows you to add, to collect data from a user. So for example, if you have a login page or a sign-in page, there you'll normally see like input fields where you can enter data, and then when you click on submit or when you click on enter or whatever, like the action, like when you click on OK, right? That data is going to be sent to some sort of server so that it's stored in the database, right? So that's basically what the form is used for. The form is used for having these elements to actually collect data from a user and push to some sort of server. So you can see there's a default attribute here called action. So when we click on action, like, when we click on submit for the form, it'll trigger some sort of action. And over here in action, we would normally add some sort of JavaScript function that will get triggered, right? So we're not going to cover that right now. We can even remove this attribute. The form will still work. And then inside over here, I'm going to create an input, right? So you can see that over here, we have this input, and then we have this get started button, right? Let's see how Netflix has actually done it, right? So what I'll do is I'm going to right click over here, inspect. And then you can see they've actually created a form, and then inside the form, they've added the H3, and then they've added this input and the button, right? So what I'll do is inside the form, I'm just going to add the H3 first. And then under the H3, I'm going to add the input. So input, like as the name suggests, and then it can be of type text, right? And then under input, I'm going to add a button. Okay. Now the button could just say get started, like that. Okay. So you can see that inside our form, we'll have the H3 and then we'll have the button. Okay. Let's see what this looks like. So you can see the logo has come up. It's quite a bit of styling to do over here. And basically we'll have this, we have this input, and then we have this get started. I'm just going to remove this for now, right? It's applying that size to everything. And you can see that there's the input and there's a get started. But on input, there's one thing that we're missing, right? So on input, for Netflix, what it says is email address. So there's like some sort of placeholder that says email address. So like as the name suggests, input allows us to add another attribute called placeholder, right? And then this placeholder can be called email address, right? And I'm just going to save that. And we've created the divs, right? So you can see email address, the placeholder is there, and then there's the get started button, and all this is inside the form, right? So that's basically the structure that we'll go with right now. And then Harjot will try to cover a few CSS concepts so we can actually get some styling done. And then we'll also be working on some other parts, the other parts of the Netflix page, probably next workshop. Yeah,
that's
cool. So
right.
Harjot, awesome. So this is the structure we'll be going with. I'm just going to push this code up. Added banner structure HTML. Git push.
I mean, we only have another 10 more minutes, so I'm just going to go over the basic structure and the div styling maybe.
Yeah.
Let's finish it
So
off
guys,
there.
I mean, if this form stuff has scared you, don't worry. We'll do a recap, and we'll cover this properly in the next workshop. But yeah, that's essentially like forms are really helpful just for collecting data. So you have that interactivity with users. Cool. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Or Jyot, over to you, man.
Cool. So Akhil just pushed his code. Everyone will be able to access this code as well. So I'm also gonna pull it. Master. Git is really cool for collaboration, eh? Like the way we just exchange codes, it's incredible. So as you can see, I just saved the HTML
Just
file.
change the game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's literally just changed the game, eh?
Yeah.
I remember we used to, before I was introduced to Git, we used to exchange code via email and WhatsApp. I don't know if Akhil remembers that, but this was like 4 years ago. That was so bad. We used to have so many zip files.
It was insane. Like I think the cool thing about Git is it tracks different version code, and it just helps with collaboration. Like those are dark times. Like
Jeez.
you know, there were times when we were like, dude, are you working off the right zip? You know, it's really messed up.
Yeah, Git is really revolutionary. Cool. So Akhil just created the divs, the structure of the Netflix landing page, and I'll just go over a few more concepts of CSS before we close off for today, and then we'll continue styling it further, creating the actual landing page in the next workshop. So CSS has multiple properties. As you can see, I actually went over color, font size. There are various over 100 properties in CSS. You can't really remember them, but you just get used to them with time. For example, if you want to add a background, there's a property called background. If you want to add a border, there's a border margin, has a margin property, padding, height, there's so many properties. I don't remember everything. I just remember a few that I keep using again and again. And with time, you'll figure out which properties you continuously use again and again. And otherwise, if you don't know what property you use, Google is your best friend, guys. That's what we believe in Zaio. We encourage candidates to use Google because if you're stuck in the real world, Google is where you're really going to go and find your answers, you know? So I also Google sometimes when I'm stuck. So please feel free to do that. So the first thing I'm going to go over is CSS fonts. So Netflix actually has its own unique font. If I go and right click on one of the fonts and click inspect. So Google Chrome has a nice tool. It's called inspect. You can inspect each and every element of the current web page that is open. So when I right click and inspect it, I can see all the HTML code that Netflix was built in. So, and if I highlight on something, I can see the CSS code that Netflix was using. So we're going to be using this tool a lot to actually copy what Netflix was doing, you know, because I don't want to be estimating what the font size is, how much the width is, you know. I can literally just go highlight the elements and find that. But anyways, we were actually going over CSS fonts, and I want to figure out what CSS font Netflix is actually using. So they're actually using a font called Netflix Sans, and that's actually not an open source font. It's Netflix has its own unique font. It's private. We can't use it. But there's something called Open Sans, and this can be found on this link, fonts.google.com. Akhil, do you mind putting this up on the YouTube chat?
Sure thing.
So if you go to fonts.google.com and search for Open Sans, you'll be able to find this font here. You click on it, and you can see this is quite similar to this Netflix font. It's not exactly the same, but we're going to be using this. So I'm just going to select the various styles that I want. I want regular italic, maybe semi-bolds, bold, that will help as well. Maybe just light as well, and extra bold if we need it. And what you can do is it gives you two options. You can link it directly inside the HTML page, or you can import it directly into CSS. So when you click on import, you highlight the imports part of it, copy that, go to your CSS code, remove everything from there and paste it. It's closed with a semicolon and it's got that import parameter over there and then the URL. And this is how we actually import a unique font into our CSS. And then the next thing you have to do is actually copy the font family declaration of CSS. And I want it to be applied to the entire landing page. Let's see what changes. This is what the font is currently. I'm just going to use the star character and add the font family there and click save. And there you go. The font type actually changed. So this is something very similar to Netflix that we found, the font that we found. And we'll be using this for the rest of the project. Cool.
Awesome. I think Harjot, let us end it there because we should like give them info for the next workshop. And,
man.
Feedback.
So what we did today is we covered the basics of HTML and CSS, just absolute basic, what is needed for Netflix. We built a part of the Netflix landing page. We didn't really finish up, but we went through a lot of concepts that are actually used in the Netflix landing page. And what we'll be doing next week, I believe the next workshop is on next week, Wednesday. We'll be going over some more advanced HTML, CSS concept, maybe go over Git, and then complete the Netflix landing page and deploy it to the web using Netlify. It's going to be so crazy how we do all this in 2 hours. The fact that you know the HTML, CSS basics and a bit of advanced concepts, we can finish the entire Netflix landing page in 2 hours. It's going to be insane, guys. It's going to be so much fun. So this is the end of our workshop, guys. So Akhil would have put the feedback link on the chat right now. And guys, we work with feedback. You can give us any feedback on our teaching, how we taught, what can we improve on, and we'll make sure to implement that. And that's how we just keep on improving our workshops. And yeah, guys, that's the end of the workshop. Akhil, anything to add on?
Yeah, so guys, I've dropped the feedback link, the forms link on the chat. Definitely check that out. And also I'm dropping the DSC link that Harris provided. And it's for RSVPing for the next workshop. So I'm sure you guys might be feeling like, we haven't really built Netflix yet. So don't stress. Trust me, like by the next workshop, Netflix will be done. At least the key elements of Netflix will be done. And you'll be surprised how much you can accomplish in just 2 hours. Definitely RSVP for the next workshop. Please give us feedback so that we can actually better the next workshop. And yeah, guys, we really appreciate it. You guys attending and stuff. And yeah, that's all from my side. Harris, do you have anything to add?
No, that's perfect. Thank you guys for hosting the event, and thank you everyone for attending. Just make sure you RSVP to next week's event. And yeah.
And yeah, guys, follow us on Instagram. We'll follow back and let's get in touch. If you have questions, anything, DM us. We're happy to help, guys. Thank you so much.
It's been great, guys.
Cool.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.